So my name is Rahila Gupta, and I'm a writer and journalist, and currently chair. Aha, hello, thank you very much. We found her. So I'm Rahila Gupta, and I'm a writer and journalist and currently chair of Southall Black Sisters. We were going to have another speaker who unfortunately couldn't make it because of ill health. And so I will, in my opening remarks, try and summarize her position because she represented quite an important voice in the whole discussion on migration, because she was the director of the Voice of Domestic Workers. And that is, in a sense, an underclass and really important to include in the discussion that we're going to have. We are holding this conversation in the shadow of one of the biggest far-right mobilizations in my lifetime, and uniquely something that is receiving support globally from a kind of a global elite. The discussion is partly being shaped by that as well. And the current spate of anti-immigrant, violent mob actions began with the Southport killings last year and have continued with mobs outside asylum seeker accommodation this year. So joining me in this conversation are three women with very long histories of working in this field and a lot of experience. And they will start talking the moment I stop talking. I will give them a chance. The session, hopefully, will be divided into 3 chunks of 30 minutes. The first half an hour, we will all have opening remarks, introduce our organizations and the work that we do, and then there will be a kind of a panel discussion for the next half hour. And then if the question and answer scheme process works out, then we'll also have Q&A. Although we are going to focus on the question of class, as the title of this session promises, I'm so horrified by the racist arguments that are now being made by the far right, which are infiltrating mainstream media narratives and even feminist discourses, that I need to provide some context. So it'll be a bit more wide-ranging than the issue of class. There are 2 other arguments. I mean, there are many arguments, but the 2 arguments that I want to deal with that are being floated currently in the racist anti-migrant discourse, one of which has been uncritically accepted by feminists who should know better. And that is the question of migrant men being sexual predators. They are not more or less so than men of any other community. And this is a trope that's been circulating at least since the 1980s, when I became politically active. Although at that time, it was not used as an argument to restrict immigration, and it was mostly directed at the second generation of African and Caribbean men. And at Southall Black Sisters, we have always accepted that Black men, like the men of any community or race or religion, are misogynist and sexist, but we have sought to place that within specific cultural, economic, and political contexts. So to try and understand, not to deny, why there might be a preponderance of Asian men, sexual predators in certain areas at a particular time, and the most recent examples have been the so-called grooming gangs of Rotherham, Rochdale, and so on. And there's a little known fact, for example, in Rochdale, where care homes, the interaction or the interconnection between grooming gangs and privatization of care homes. So Rochdale is an area of historic low property prices, low wages, fairly high unemployment, and they have 47 care homes. And to give you a comparison, Haringey, which is a similar size to Rochdale, has only 2 care homes. And they have historically been used as recruiting grounds for vulnerable young girls by abusive men. High unemployment, low educational achievements, then they create an environment where drug dealing, pimping, and taxi driving are the only profitable occupations left. You combine this with an attitude among some Asian men that white girls are easy, and we have an explosive mix. That's just in the sense of context. The other issue that we've seen recently is the allegations that the data proves that sexual crime is higher among migrant men. And it seems to have ensnared some feminists into believing that women's safety can only be ensured by opposing migration. So even though we know that most violence against women takes place in the home, where of course we may be living with migrants, and despite data being revealed that 2/3 of the men arrested at the Southport protests had convictions for domestic violence, these are the superficial conclusions that are being drawn from that data. And it's unreliable for a number of reasons. I understand, for example, that the figures that have been released by the police are for those who are charged, not sentenced. Also, the proportion of foreign nationals serving sentences for sexual crime is actually smaller than their share of the population. Thirdly, the police computerized systems are apparently old and notoriously unreliable in terms of recording nationality accurately. And the other issue that people have raised is that sexual crimes are more likely to be committed by young men who are overrepresented amongst the migrant population. Nevertheless, the racist constructions around migration and sexual crime are reaching such a fever pitch that we feel that we have to undertake in-depth research and analysis of the figures and framed by more rational assumptions in order to dispel these allegations once and for all. The other argument is the more standard one of asylum seekers sponging off resources that are not available to the local poor working classes. And the common refrain that we hear is they're being put up in hotels where we can't get access to housing. And many arguments have already been made in support of the economic benefits that migrants bring to the UK, apart from the fact that services like transport, health, education would collapse without the presence of migrants. What people don't realize is that the share of the economic pie is not reduced by the arrival of the migrants, because it's not static, it grows. The economic pie grows with their arrival. And really, poor housing and other issues are a question of government policies and austerity. Research has also shown that 1 in 4, in order to maintain the system of pensions that we have, you need, for every older person, you need 4 people, 4 young people in work, and the youth population is dropping. The other issue is that doctors and nurses who are trained abroad, it's a net benefit to the UK because we did not have to invest in their training. And there's just another argument that I quickly want to touch upon, which is almost never heard in the national narrative. And it's an argument which shows how the small boats actually keep Britain afloat. So if you take British-based multinationals, they are responsible for displacing vast populations abroad. And if you were to do a cost-benefit analysis of what profits were repatriated to the UK, how much employment was created here, what taxes were paid versus the cost of accommodating the small percentage of those displaced people who actually seek asylum here, you would find that actually Britain does pretty well out of it. Millions of people have been forced to make way, for example, for large dams, oil pipelines, agricultural plantations in which UK companies are involved, often as a condition of UK aid money. And the statistic is dams alone, many of them backed by Britain, have displaced an estimated 80 million people since the Second World War. So you can see this size of the problem. And dams, you could argue, is a relatively benign enterprise before we even talk about the British armaments industry. The UK is one of the topmost arms exporters, and the weapons, those weapons have been used in conflicts that have produced massive refugee flows and instability, like Yemen or Libya. And many of the boat people who are trafficked from Libya, which has become a staging post for migrants from other parts of the world, because there is total instability, because Britain was involved in the toppling of Gaddafi. And for us, particularly, we have been talking a lot about Afghanistan, and that's a better known example. The British have been militarily involved for the last 2 decades. And if we were to do a quick cost-benefit analysis of that, you'd see that in 2023, the arms industry contributed £12 billion to the British economy and provided employment for nearly 200,000 people here. It paid approximately £250 to £500 million in taxes to the Treasury. And that year, 5,500 Afghans arrived in small boats. The cost for supporting all those asylum seekers, all the asylum seekers, not just the Afghans, was about $5 billion in 2023, which was less than half the $12 billion that the British economy got. And remember, it's only one of the industries that is generating both refugees and money. So I think this is a really important context to bear in mind to try and demolish some of the racism behind the arguments of, why are we supporting these people actually, they're supporting us, and they're here because of the way in which we've destroyed their environment and their livelihoods. So to come now to the question of class in migration, specifically in relation to women, my sense is that the working class has traditionally been seen and represented as white. Black people and migrants are never constructed as working class. They can never belong, not even to the class system of Britain. The argument goes that the poverty and neediness of migrants deprives the white working class of their rightful access to resources. There's a kind of special pleading on behalf of the white communities that protest against the arrival of refugees, that they are dispossessed as a class, that their dispossession validates the racist response. There's a kind of special pleading going on there. And we don't even have a figure for the non-white working class in the UK, although in the US, the figure is 40% of the working class is non-white. And so class is being used to condone or understand the mob violence outside the asylum seeker accommodation and the rise of the far right. What used to be seen as a negative label, and coyly the British politicians would refer to them as working people, today working class has become coded for victimhood and a competitive victimhood with migrants. They are constructed as the left behind, a result of mass, uncontrollable, illegal immigration, and not capitalist exploitation, which is really the main villain. And before I hand over to the panel, I just want to try and represent Marissa Begonia, who is the director of the Voice of Domestic Workers, who I referred to at the beginning, who couldn't be here today, because she has an important perspective which we need to bear in mind. She represents mainly migrant women who were brought to this country as domestic workers on a domestic worker visa, which ties them to one employer, regardless of whether they face violence or not. So if they were or an abusive situation or working long slave-like conditions, they would not be able to get the right to, well, they would be basically deported because of the visa situation. If they do escape a violent employer, they may be able to get the right to remain under the trafficking legislation. While they wait for their status to be legalized, Marissa told us that the women she deals with face stop and search in the street and also on the buses based on racial profiling and skin color. And now there are live facial recognition vans called LFR vans that go around the streets of London in particular, and they've been deployed by the Metropolitan Police to arrest undocumented migrant workers. So she describes the police being so trigger happy in their response to criminalize these women. And she gives the example at Charing Cross Station. She said that the police took digital fingerprints of a woman who Marissa had referred to them for the national referral mechanism as a victim of modern slavery and trafficking. And the first thing they did was take her digital fingerprints, and they were getting the Home Office involved. And she said that if she hadn't turned up at the police station, they would have deported her. So that's the kind, and Marissa had to actually explain the law to them. So migrant women are often part of an invisible underclass, whether they are in work or not, living with uncertainty, with sexual exploitation, with fear of authorities, fear of imprisonment and deportation, on top of the economic deprivation that they share in common with the white working class. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to the panelists. They will introduce themselves and they will talk a little bit about your work. And shall we just do it in the order that you're sitting? Are you happy, Salome, to go first?
I'm very happy indeed. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And again, it's really a pleasure to be here this afternoon and to speak to you. Again, my name is Salome Mbugua. I was born originally from Kenya. Those who are in this room earlier heard about Kakuma, and actually Kakuma is in my country as well, one of the largest refugee camp. But I live in Ireland and I work in Ireland. And Ireland is actually very important to talk in this meeting, mainly because, Ireland is not very far from here. It's just a matter of 1 hour flight, and then you are here. But also apart from that, we from Ireland, based on my work and what I know, is like actually we run a lot, or we try to get a lot of what UK is doing in terms of policy and laws to our own. I don't know whether many of you know, but we always say, for example, in Ireland, that immigration is a very new thing. It's not new. I've been in Ireland for 31 years. You might think I'm 31, but I've been there for 31 years. But, the thing is, there are a lot of issues that are happening, with migrant women. And from us, when we talk about migrant women, and when I say us, it's an organization that I work with, AKIDWA, Akina Dada wa Africa, which means sisterhood in Swahili. It's a network of migrant women living in Ireland, and we've been in existence in the last 25 years. We've done a lot of work in those last 25 years. But also what I want to say is that at the very beginning and the very opening of my talk here and sharing with you is that what I have observed and what I have seen in the last 30 years of my life in Ireland is that migrant women are not a homogeneous group. We are a very huge, diverse group of people. And myself, actually, I always look at, who is there. I don't like talking about vulnerability and the vulnerable, but we cannot actually stop from talking on who is vulnerable, even among migrants themselves. We have the undocumented, we would name them, we work with them. We have asylum seekers and refugees. We also have people who think that they have it all because you are under the status of your husband, who might be Irish or might be European, but you are living in a very vulnerable situation. And so we work with these women who have so many needs and very many diverse needs. And actually, when we talk about class, and I'll talk about the class, later, sometimes I question, what class are we even talking about? For example, if we talk about asylum seekers who arrived maybe a week ago, but they don't even have proper accommodation. They are sharing maybe 7 of them or 8 of them in a room. They are not allowed to work. In Ireland, you're only allowed to work after 6 months. If you have not actually gone through your application, you have not actually presented yourself for your application for asylum. So if you don't actually get that right to work within the 6 months, it means that, you'll be, receiving social welfare, where you have to get around 38 euros a week. You're not allowed to work. You can't access education. So what are you supposed to do? So when we talk about class, because class is mainly sometimes defined by, the employment or the work that you do to help you to live the kind of living standard that you'd like to live. How do you get from there? So in January of this year, we published a report which is called the Amplifying the Unheard Voices of Migrant Women. So it's called the Unheard Voices. And this is actually a research that we carried. Our organization does a lot of work. So first of all, we work on the area of DSGBV, where we work on, domestic violence, but our key major area of work in our organization is known as female genital mutilation, because we are the only organization that is working on this area. And in Ireland, we have almost 6,000 women who have been subjected to female genital mutilation. The challenge we have in that is that, we only have one clinic where these women can be supported. So you'll find that we have even over maybe 300, % of, people are waiting to be seen. Maybe they'll be seen after a year or even more than a year because the queue is very long and there's only that one center, to support these women. And again, when we talk about the class and these women actually being positioned into a situation where they can work, you cannot be able to work until your health needs are met. And so it's very, very difficult. So in my organization, when we talk about, sexual and gender-based violence, then we talk about health, and then we talk about integration, where we find that, employment is very key and is very important in terms of actually helping women to make decisions in their life, in particular migrant women. But there are so many challenges and bureaucracies, that they are there. Our very recent research shows that many employers will not employ a migrant with a migrant name, mainly because they don't understand their work permit or their visa, or whether they are refugees or asylum seekers. They don't understand about the immigration stamp or visas. And so even though they would be very highly qualified, even though they have PhD, they have masters and everything which they had gotten from the country, it will still be very difficult for them to get jobs, mainly because the employer fear to engage with them in case they put them into trouble. So what I want to say is that, from our work experience and what we do in Ireland, it's actually extremely, very, very difficult. And I hope you all listened to some of you who are here before we went for lunch break, on how migrant women faces a lot of difficulties. We have a large number of women who have been trafficked into Ireland. It's a small country, but it's also a transit country where, women are trafficked from Ireland to other places. And this is happening as well. And also some of the women are being trafficked within the country itself. So there's a lot happening with migrant women, that when they even come into the country, they are kept into this accommodation center. They are called now emergency accommodation centers, where they are kept for a long time. They don't actually sometimes do the vulnerability assessments to see what are the needs of these women. How can we help them? How can we facilitate them even to be able to get to the labor market, or to survive, because they need to survive. So our work is hard for the fact that, we are always trying to convince the policymakers and people that can help, women to work with us so that we can be able to support migrant women in a meaningful way. But it's very, very difficult. So just to say that, the life of migrant women that I see in Ireland, and when I say migrant, it encompasses so many women in that. So they could be women refugees, they could be women asylum seekers, they could be spouses, they could be me who have stayed in that country for 30 years, but still faces a lot of racism and discrimination and so many other challenges, including racial profiling. So what do we do actually to support these women in a meaningful way and to help them to build their life? So everything is determined by your legal immigration status that you have in the country, but you have to pay for everything. You have to pay for your health, you have to pay for your education as well, if you want to educate yourself. But there are also a lot of challenges in terms of racism and discrimination. And so our work is to continue challenging those systemic barriers and challenges that still remain. And even though sometimes we have policies, like policies on domestic violence, where the woman is supposed to seek for independent status if she's experiencing male violence, it doesn't happen automatically. The minister has to be able to agree that you really need to be supported, you really need that help. And so it can be very difficult for many migrant women also who do not have legal support, that they are waiting to be supported by free legal aid, mainly because free legal aid may come when it's very late for you. Maybe you are going to appear for your hearing and you don't even get to meet them. You meet them in the morning that you're going for your application. So challenges are many, and in fact, the whole issue of being the vulnerable of the vulnerables, in many situations is a reality for many migrant women in Ireland. And you've also seen, all of you, maybe what is happening here in UK. It's also what is happening in Ireland with the far right, with the anti-migrant. We had a demonstration 3 weeks ago, and it was very funny because first we had you know, a march against racism, then we had a march for Jesus, and then we had anti-migrant. So we had 3 marches in a day, rather than having one march that helped us all, you know, to be able to resolve the issues and the problems that we have, you know, and I hope Jesus could help in that, but really it didn't work out that way. But it's really very, very challenging, because sometimes I feel like even, you know, the movement and, you know, Ireland has seemed to be very progressive in terms of the equalities that we have fought for women, you know, like marriage equality. You know, it's known as one of the countries that was actually leading in that. We also have, you know, access to abortion. Ireland fought and we got that. And recently, you know, we had people coming from one of the foundation wanting to know how has Ireland helped to be progressive like this? What's happening? What's the magic with the women here in Ireland? I was among those 7 women who met with the foundation, and we were shocked because we don't see that progressiveness, you know? You're just asking which women, you know, because every time myself I ask which women, because, you know, we cannot just sit down and assume that we are all the same. We are very different in so many ways. And so even when we talk about class, even among migrants themselves, we have to ask which women are we talking about, you know, in terms of class, because we can assume that, you know, class is assumed to be within the framework of working and employment, but it could be that, you know, you don't even have that permit to be able to work. So there are real challenges that are facing migrant women, and we continue to fight these challenges and to, you know, speak against these challenges as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hannana Siddiqui from Suffer Black Sisters.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me to speak. I remember I was on the stage in the original Brighton conference, and I was asked to chair a session, and I said, no, I can't chair. They said, why? Why can't you chair? And I was very young at that time, and very inexperienced, and I said, I'm too scared. So it's nice to be able to come back to this building, which I think it's like still needs to be updated, but yeah, okay, I'm less scared, but still it's just as angry about things have not moved on enough. Some things have, I accept that, particularly around domestic abuse, the work that we do, and some of the issues that we also campaign on around forced marriage, honor-based violence, and so forth, and even on migration. But it hasn't gone far enough because it hasn't protected all women from Black, minoritized, and migrant communities against gender-based violence. And the Southall Black Sisters has been around for like 46 years now, and we've always had to deal with the issue of migration because about 60% of our service users are migrant women, who are facing domestic abuse, forced marriage, honor-based violence, and an insecure status. A lot of the women that we assist are here on spousal visas, although increasingly that's changing because violent men are using other ways of bringing women in so that it doesn't give them a real status anymore. But those on spousal visas and those who are on dependent visas are particularly vulnerable or have been particularly vulnerable because their right to stay in this country is dependent on a violent spouse or a partner, which means that they face a stark choice between staying in an abusive relationship or leaving that relationship and facing deportation. Not only are they facing deportation, they're also facing destitution because of the no recourse to public funds condition that many migrants have on their visas. And of course, those who overstayed, who are illegal in the country, have no rights at all and are extremely vulnerable. And don't even have the right to use any kind of provisions that you may have to be able to stay in the country, and cannot access benefits and so forth. Now, the majority of the women that we deal with, so if you're looking at the intersection between race, class, and sex, the majority of the women that we assist are from poor backgrounds. They are working class, of course. Working class is not seen as black, but they are working class. And a lot of those who work, and some women do have the right to work, work in the lower paid jobs, the care industry, the NHS, cleaning, and others who don't work may not be able to work or because of skills or because their abuser won't let them work and try to control their whole lives. And often those women are trapped because they kind of cannot be economically independent because they may not be able to work or they don't have a high income, and they have this no recourse to public funds condition, which means they are dependent. They're facing economic abuse because they're dependent on the spouse and partner to look after them and to maintain them. And often we know that women's immigration status and their inability to escape because they cannot claim benefits when you have no recourse to public funds is weaponized against them to control them, to keep them in an abusive relationship. And in most cases, women are not able to leave. Now, those who may be forced to leave or are left or abandoned are then facing complete destitution. Now, as Black feminists, Southall Black Sisters has led a campaign for reforms, and we have achieved some reforms on immigration law, piecemeal reforms over a period of over 30 years. It's not been immediate, it's been slow, and it's been possible under successive governments, but we didn't really make headway till New Labour came into power. And then we were given a concession for those who are here on spousal visas, who are victims of domestic abuse, can apply to stay in this country indefinitely, having proved that they are victims of domestic abuse, which was a major victory for Black feminists, and it's made a major difference to women's lives that we've been helping and assisting. But it wasn't until like 10 years later or 15 years later that we got the destitution domestic violence concession under Conservatives, under Theresa May. So under that concession, those here on spousal visas who are who apply to stay in the country as a victim of domestic abuse can also access public funds for a period of 3 months. It's not for long, for a period of 3 months whilst they regularize their status. Again, that has been a major victory. Sometimes it feels like a small victory because it's not often acknowledged, but it's actually a major victory, and it's helped thousands of women to stay in the country and to access benefits. But of course, that doesn't help everyone. If you're here on a different visa and you're trapped in a violent relationship, you might be here on a visa in your own right, but then still be trapped in a violent relationship. And women, if you're looking at class and women's financial position, in most cases of domestic abuse, even if they're not migrant, if they're leaving an abusive relationship, even if they are earning a good income or have some wealth, often it's joint wealth or a wealth that is controlled by the abuser, then they may be middle class. They're all often plunged into poverty anyway, because once you leave an abusive relationship and you don't have control of your own finances, or you don't have enough finances, then you're facing poverty anyway. But if you're a migrant woman and you have no recourse to public funds and all your finances are controlled elsewhere, or you're forced to leave work because you are destitute and no longer, and not safe to go back to work, then you have that extra barrier. And here we have many cases of women who are completely destitute, women who may be street homeless with their children often, because where women can go to social services for help with their children, often social services deter them from seeking help because they say, oh, well, we'll take the child into care. We don't have a duty to you under the Children's Act. We have a duty to the children. Or they might say, oh, we will, the father, an abusive father can look after the children, or a family member can, and usually that's the in-laws, because women don't have to have their own families in this country because they've migrated here. And often women don't want that. They don't want to put their children at risk. They want to be with their children. what's ironic here, these are women who don't want to neglect their children. They go to social services because they want to support their children, and yet these are women who are then not seen, the families are not seen as worthy enough to be able to be kept together in order for women to be staying with their children in order to look after them and to house them and so forth. So social services have inconsistent and sometimes very poor responses, and then women again plunged into poverty and homelessness as a result. Already? I'll come about some of the wider points. So I'm sorry, for our current campaigns, we really want to be able to get your support to extend the reforms that we have done for those on spousal visas to all women, regardless of their immigration status. So, I just wanted to make this point about under the new Labour government. We were promised that under the new Labour government that we will get that reform on day one. On day one. Now, it's been over a year now, and we've had no proper response on this issue from ministers. That includes Jess Phillips and Alex Davis-Jones and others, those who are working on violence against women and girls. And they're saying that, these women do face discrimination. And Jess Phillips certainly supported us in our campaigns when she was in opposition. And is sympathetic to what we're saying, but we have not seen the reforms that we would like to see. And instead, we've got the racist rhetoric on migration, on immigration control. We've got the white paper out now, which now means that you can't get a citizenship until you've been in this country legally for 10 years. It used to be 5 years. So it's even harder now to get citizenship. A lot of the women that we assist get indefinite leave to remain, but it's now, even under Labour, because of the Reform UK saying, we want to get rid of indefinite leave to remain, Labour is responding to that racist rhetoric, even though they've called Reform racist, by making it harder to get indefinite leave to remain. And the whole thing about the white paper is that you now need a skilled worker's visa to be able to get into this country, and often that means you have high income groups who have always been able to travel anyway, they're the ones who are going to find it easier to come and stay in this country. And a lot of the women that we assist will not be able to get indefinite leave to remain because of the conditions that put it on. We'll find it hard to get citizenship in the long run. And we're seeing this trend that so like Reform, all the political parties want to appease, they think they will win votes from people by appeasing this demand for more immigration control, which is then being fueled by the far right and the people like Nigel Farage. And I would say that there are some women's organizations in black minority communities who've also been supporting that trend. And that is extremely, extremely disappointing, considering that that they should be showing solidarity for women from all backgrounds, those who have insecure immigration status, to be able to escape violence against women. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Faty, hand over to you.
Thank you, Rahila, and sorry again for being late. I was searching for the backstage, I couldn't find it. That's my sense of direction. I was here yesterday morning and I couldn't find it, so
there's no
that's
steps.
Me.
There's no steps to the stage.
That's the problem. But anyway, my name is Faty and I am the Executive Director of the Angelou Center. We are a Black-led organization based in Newcastle in the northeast of England. And we specialize in supporting Black, racially minoritized, and migrant women and children who are at risk or experiencing domestic abuse and other forms of violence against women and girls. For me, I think every day we see how immigration policies, institutional racism, and the exclusion of welfare really combine to push migrant women into destitution. You talked a lot about no recourse public fund, and I was wondering, will she leave anything for me to say?
Sorry.
But
That's okay, because we can do with the extra time.
no, that's fine. But I think I will just focus on the state of things, because in my view, I mean, there is some fantastic campaign going on, and a lot of work has been done to really address the unfair and discriminatory policies that really deny migrant women their most basic fundamental rights in terms of just, you know, having, I don't know if people really understand no recourse public fund, and it's very personal to me because I came in this country on spousal visa, so I had no recourse public fund. So when I say that, it's just, I feel like this issue is not being addressed with the urgency it deserves, not by mainstream feminist movements, and not by anti-racist movements either. And that matters because immigration status, which also defines the socioeconomic status of migrant women, kind of created a kind of apartheid. We are in a system where some women are allowed to flee abuse when they can, and we have women that are trapped in abusive relationships just because of their immigration status. And we are not talking about just few isolated cases. We are talking about every single woman in this country who doesn't have British citizenship, every single woman who doesn't have indefinite leave to remain, and you can only get that if you are in this country at least for 5 years and paying a few £1,000s to get that status, or if you are granted a refugee status, that means you have gone through the hoops and the trauma of seeking asylum. So this is every single woman in this country. Basically, if you live in this country, work in this country, contribute, your kids go to school in this country, if something goes wrong, the UK government is saying, good luck. That is what is happening in this country. And for me, this is the biggest women's rights violation in this country, hiding in plain sight. So if we are really serious about ending violence against women and girls, we cannot treat this as a side issue. We must stand alongside migrant women and really fight for this if we want all of us women to really be free. So that's just what I would say for now and stop there.
Okay, thank you very much. So quite a lot of issues have come up in your presentations. One of the things that you were saying about migrants with qualifications from their home countries who can't get work. What's that relationship when you, so I presume that they come here as middle class, and because of their lack of job opportunities or the kind of jobs they do, they enter working class, have working class options. What is that relationship? What happens? I mean, is there a shift in class for those migrants? You know, what's going on? Does the migration status actually change their class status? This is what I'm trying to get at.
I think that's one of the dilemma we have within the whole, you know, state of immigration with migrant women. For example, you know, we had actually a huge research that was announced at the beginning of the year, where I think it was in March, where it said that, you know, we have more migrants working in Ireland than the indigenous, for example. And when you look at that, there's quite a huge number of women who are working in hospitality and care. So you'll find that, you know, even if they get these jobs, which is the lowest ladder for them, because most of them are very highly qualified, like we are saying, even though they are working, and actually the research also showed that even though they are getting good income because they are working so many hours, it's not because they are being paid very well. Even though they are getting a lot of money, that money cannot still help them to pay the housing, because actually housing is one of the key major, it's the most expensive, one of the most expensive, housing and childcare. And so they're not even able to pay and then meet the other needs. And you'll still find that, lives of migrant women quite often remain the same. It remains exactly the same. You would find that most of them have families back home. They are catering for families back home and families in the country. They will not be able to purchase a house, most of them, because you need a lot of money to purchase the house. So I would say that from my experience and the life that I have lived in Ireland, I've actually not seen that shift in the last 30 years, because there's no promotion. Even if you get a job in care, it's not that you're going to be moved from becoming a nurse assistant to a nurse. You still remain there, and your struggles still remain. They still remain the same. So it still continues to be a struggle after struggle every day for many migrant women, and I've not seen their class shift at all. Even when you talk about them representing these issues at the areas of decision making, or even seeing them in meetings, you won't see them. They are not there. So it's a huge challenge. It's a real issue. It doesn't shift. We haven't seen that shift, of life of migrant women becoming, climbing actually the ladder of moving into that. The whole situation of social and economic hierarchy, is huge there. You don't see migrant women moving at all.
Is that what, does that reflect the experience of both of you in terms of the women you serve?
I'll speak before her.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've got this cough.
No, it's okay.
Won't go away.
So she doesn't cover what I have to say.
Go.
No, I mean, the experience we have at the Angelou Center, we've supported a lot of professional women, people who come very highly educated, senior professionals, who are back in their countries, lawyers, doctors, entrepreneurs, you name it. The moment they come here first, it doesn't matter who you are back in your country. When you come here, you are a migrant. That's just what it doesn't matter, it's a migrant. And just a little diversion. Interestingly enough, when white people go outside in our countries, they're not migrants, they are expats. Did you know that? Expats. That's what they are. It's just unbelievable. We come here, we are migrants, they go there, they are expats. Anyway, that was just a little diversion. But just to say, it doesn't matter.
We don't learn the language of the local country either.
Exactly,
Yeah.
we don't bother.
Yeah.
But yeah, when we come here, we just migrant. It doesn't matter the education and the level of income or whatever. But what is interesting, and that goes back to the Nordic Public Fund, and that's why it is so critical, what is happening to women is that overnight you can go from being middle class, high level income, whatever you like, and because someone has decided to revoke your visa because you're dependent on your visa, you go from this to zero. Absolutely destitute. I don't know what class you are at that point, but you just become homeless and jobless overnight.
Do you think, though, that they sort of, do they bring a cultural capital with them?
That's what I'm saying. The cultural
class?
capital would open the doors, but then racism and the system that has been created by the state would close that door for you.
Yeah.
This is engineered by the system, by the state. It is not, you don't become poor because of your own responsibility. Basically, the state makes you poor. It is engineered poverty by the state because of the immigration rules and the immigration control that the state has put in place. And the system is working. It is not a glitch, it's not a gap. It is designed this way to make us poor and to control us socially. This is the state-made condition.
Yeah. No, I agree with that, but what I was trying to work out was whether there is a kind of resistance, an ability to resist your circumstances because of the middle class entitlement that you might have come with from the countries of origin. Does that give you a greater ability to fight back, to resist the system, to try? And I know you say that most of the migrant women you see have not made that kind of progression because the system does beat them down. But does your original class give you a certain head start, if you like, in life? Because you've got education, you've got language, you've got
It
all
does, and to her point at the beginning, because we are seen as one homogeneous group, but actually there is so much diversity within migrant women. Some of us would be able to navigate the system much easier because of that cultural capital, that resources that we're coming with. Maybe some of us don't have that language barrier, which is absolutely massive for migrant women. You come with education, especially when you come from an English-speaking country. That's not my case. I come from a French-speaking country. So for me, I have a barrier of my degrees are not recognized in this country. It is just simply not. It's zero. So if you come from an English-speaking country, if you come from the Commonwealth, all of that stuff actually does help you. Going back to that colonial legacy, it does make a difference which country you're coming from, and the cultural capital you're coming from.
I think the other thing is that might help to sort of, in terms of the social capital and people resisting, a lot of the women who come to South or Black sisters, are not necessarily from middle class backgrounds, they're from working class backgrounds. But once they've got the support of our organization and women's organizations and feminists and anti-racists who want to support them through the process, so giving them practical support but also helping to politicize them, has meant that they've also, through their own experience of resistance and through the experience of other women they meet who've gone through this resistant process personally and politically, has made them more determined to fight back. So they're often campaigning, they're often campaigners themselves who want to change the system. That's how, I don't think class is entirely the reason. I would say it's personal experience, but also supported by organizations and feminists and those who are helping them to politicize. They often want to give back. They often want, this is ironic that, Labour is saying, you've got to contribute to society to get your stay, and these women have completely contributed to society, more than often many others in Britain who hasn't. They haven't lifted off the state. They want to work. They want to, look after their children. They want their children to do well. And in many cases, their children do well once they overcome their barriers. So I think that there is a kind of a resistance that women have themselves, that migrant women have themselves, that needs to be nurtured and developed by the movement itself. And we need to do more of that, because by empowering them, they also create social change. And I also just want to say that, when my father came here in the 1960s, it's kind of the same pattern you're talking about. He was a teacher, and I suppose that'd be seen as lower middle class in this country. And yet his qualifications weren't recognized, And so, and he had to do, be a bus conductor, work on the trains or whatever to get an income and in a factory and so forth. And suddenly, you do become working class in that process. So, your class does shift because you face the same barriers. Maybe mentally it doesn't entirely, but physically and materially, you're facing extra barriers in order to be able to get, to get access to improved lives and so forth, and fulfilling your lives and so forth. And a lot of the people who migrated there was for economic reasons, and rightly so. Why shouldn't they come here? Why shouldn't people travel around the world for economic reasons? The rich do, right? Why can't we do it? White people do it all the time. But also because they want the children to get an education. Obviously they had aspirations. But materially, they couldn't get that.
I mean, I have a sort of similar story to that of your father myself, because I came to this country as a middle-class person, and I was working in a shoe shop, because all my role models, my aunt had done a degree in law, but she was only working as a telex operator, so I had no models of progress.
Yeah.
And I was working in a shoe shop, I was doing an MPhil, and then in the middle of an MPhil, they say, do you want to extend this to a PhD? And I thought, oh my God, I'll be known as Dr. Gupta, and I'll be working in a shoe shop, and I'll be, you know, sort of people will mock me. So I thought, no, I'm not going to extend it to a PhD. So I never got a PhD because I didn't want to have doctor before my name.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's a whole other story. Yeah, so, but in terms, we'll have one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. I don't know, have you had some questions? Okay, that's good. To address this issue of, we've talked about diverse group and, you know, and not being seen as homogenous, but in terms of the demands that we make politically to the Labour Party, to the government, do we feel a pressure to construct migrant women as victims? You know, so we can't acknowledge that diversity, we can't acknowledge sort of high level of skills. Is there a pressure of creating sort of a victim sort of picture of the women that we serve in order to make sure that we get services and whatever else that we're looking for?
For myself, I actually don't think so, because, you know, women have agency. You know, they are, like the women we are talking about, they're not just women. They're women who are highly qualified. They are women who are with skills that are being de-skilled because they're not being allowed to, you know, participate into the labor market. And, you know, some of them are engineers. We don't have them. You know, we need nurses. We need, you know, different, you know, psychologists, social workers. Some of them have trained, but they won't be allowed to work. So when I go to our own public representative and, you know, politicians, I speak about these women as women who are qualified, women who have the agency. We cannot just put them as victims, you know, or survivors of, you know, violence. They are more than that. And so I think that's, for me, it's very important that we don't just show them, okay, they need to be supported, but they don't need to be put as victims or, you know, survivors, because they are more than that, you know, in the little sense. And we can evidence it, you know, because we have statistics in my organization showing, like, you know, how many women who have PhD, you spoke about PhD there, and they are working in care work. Well, they should be actually working in a law firm or a legal firm or in another area that is actually highly matches their qualifications. So we see sometimes, you know, even when we advocate for these women, and from my report that I said about unheard voices, some of the policymakers will listen and they'll try to help as much as they can. The women maybe will get into the labor market. Okay, they shift, their life shift a bit because they're able to work now, but they never get to reach that glass ceiling, you know, of competing with other women, you know, because they are more actually than sometimes, you know, indigenous women in terms of qualifications and what they can do. But I would never put them as just victims, you know, they are more than that.
Okay. Do you want to come in on that?
I think it's complicated. I mean, of course, we use the word survivor because often women who've escaped abuse and, you know, rebuild their lives are survivors. And even if they haven't escaped abuse, they still negotiate their safety within an abusive relationship, and they are survivors. But I think on a political level, we do present them as survivors, and they are survivors. But we have to talk about victims as well, because they're the victim of the state. The immigration laws trap them in that violent relationship. So we have to say that, you know, that the state has created a situation of victimization, has kind of allowed perpetrators to weaponize the law against them, which the state has created. So, you know, we have to be able to say that the state should not put anyone in that position of, you know, victimhood or you know, lack of security and safety. And so we've used, you know, strategically, we've used the violence against women and girls strategies or policies that various governments have had to push that argument. We haven't been able to so successfully use the argument around rights for migrants, but we have been able to use the rights of the victims of domestic abuse, because that is what a lot of people understand, you know, that nobody should be a victim of abuse. So I think that there's a mixture of things. I don't think women see themselves as victims, and we don't. And but the state, when you're negotiating rights, you have, so we kind of tend to use now victim survivors as a mixture.
I think from a practical level, the language around commissioning and grant making is needs-based. So because of that, it is victimization. Yeah. It is just the reality of it. Yeah. Yeah. We are serving most of our demographics. They need help, they need support. And this is when you fill in your application, the questions they're asking you is for those who need help. So yes, it is victimization. That's just the reality. Even if you look at how our services are designed and the type of our offer, we are really designed to support women who have language barriers. I mean, I'm speaking from a by and for specialist perspective. People that need English because they don't speak English as a first language, people that have uncertain immigration status, women that are in employment. Even the training and courses we offer, it's ESOL, it's basic digital skills. It is really geared, our offer, and this is true for most of our services. The profile of women we support, it is the woman who is in need of that support. It is just the reality of it.
Yeah. Okay, it's a difficult situation to navigate. Have you got questions for us? I hope I can read your handwriting. Oh, wow, there's quite a few. Okay, thanks. So the first question that I've got in my hand is, are there any statistics in the organizations you're involved with about how many skilled professional women amongst the refugee and migrants who could have been a real help to the system? Do we keep statistics?
Not of skilled migrant women. We know that it's a small number.
Would it be helpful to us to do
well, we're going to be forced to do that now anyway. You can only get a skilled migrant.
Sorry? Nobody
You can only get a skilled workers visa now. Yeah. So you'll get that stat soon, yeah.
No,
I don't know how many.
The migrants that we are dealing with are not coming in on a skilled workers visa.
Yeah, I think it's a small number, but I don't know. I don't have the number.
We do actually have numbers in
Do you have?
Because the state actually commissioned one of the researchers to do research every year, and we do have them. And migrant women actually occupies a large number of people who are highly qualified in Ireland.
And you probably won't know the figures off by heart.
No, not by heart, but they are among the highly qualified.
We've got figures for the visas, the type of visas they have, but the skilled migrant visas are very small. But I don't know the numbers.
Are we talking about people on skilled visas or people with who have skills, like who come with high education and who could be in jobs that are well paid?
I'm presuming it says skilled professional women. What sort of statistics do we have amongst our base?
We do have them.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, some of it I can't read very well. Can you, in terms of having searched for support, and forward, how have organizations like Amnesty? So I think there's a question here about how organizations like Amnesty International, the Law Society, and other legal bodies have come out with verbal or financial support. I think that's what the question is. Amnesty International does quite a lot of work, does it not? I mean, weren't we involved on the no recourse to public funds long time ago? Now, what is the situation?
Recently, no. I mean, just to make a general point, that I don't think that the left or the human rights movement have done enough to work around migrant women, and in our work around violence against women and girls, And, you know, I think that the way things are moving, the whole immigration agenda is moving to the far right, or aiming, trying to appease the far right attitudes, that, you know, the left needs to do a lot more. And, you know, like even with the changes in the visa requirements now, the unions are going to be impacted on this. You know, you're not possible to get. You know, they're going to lose workers and members and so forth. So the unions should be doing a lot more to deal with this issue. But I think that generally the left is not doing enough. There are migration coalitions of people who are working on it, but generally the left is not. In fact, you know, I don't know if you want to see Labour as the left, but
I don't know.
yeah,
not
but they're,
now.
you know, they're the ones who are also introducing very harsh immigration controls.
Yeah. Anybody want to come in on that? Anybody else?
I don't know.
Those
Not
of us
understand.
party members like me have to speak up.
Yeah.
We're in here, you know, if we're in the bloody party, then I personally feel they're not having my pennies without support for
Yeah.
all of the people who are eligible.
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Agreed.
How much success we can have, though, from within the Labour Party has been something of a test, hasn't it, recently? But, yeah. Okay, this is a question about the fact that this is not affecting just new migrants, but that also people with settled status are having issues with the Home Office. How much of that do you come across as an issue, and how do you deal with that?
Well, it's a trend that's just starting. You know, I had someone who's been refused ILR, indefinite leave to remain, who's quite skilled and don't understand why they've been refused. And I think that this trend is happening. There's a woman that we're going to probably start a campaign for who's a victim of domestic abuse, and they've accepted that she's a victim of domestic abuse, but yet they won't, even though she doesn't fit into the spousal visas, they could use their discretion in order to give her leave, and yet they haven't been doing that. So I think it's getting more difficult, and we're going to have to do more campaigning. And what's also very worrying is that, you know, I know Reform UK is not the government, but they could become the government, and the other parties are trying to follow them, is that they're saying that indefinite leave to remain, the abolition is retrospective, which means, so everybody who's got indefinite leave to remain at the moment, who hasn't become a citizen, and I'm sure they'll go for the citizens next, you know, it's like a Windrush situation. You don't know if you have legal rights in this country or not, even though you may be here for years. And even people like me, you know, came in as a migrant community, even though I got citizenship now, are going to be very unsure about their position in this country and could be facing deportation unless you can get another visa, which is extremely difficult to do. And I think that is a right-wing ideology that's been taken up by the mainstream, and you've seen it being filtered through current government practice in terms of the number of refusals that are increasing.
I think it's the Trump factor to a
Yeah.
large extent as well. We are seeing this actually all around the world. I mean, there's no certainty for migrants in America either, and I
Yeah.
think we're kind of heading in that direction if we're not able to swing the Labour Party, or if there isn't going to be a left-wing alternative to the Labour Party. They're all searching the same ground. So the Labour Party is, you know, imitating the Tories are imitating Reform. The whole of it is being pulled to the right, and this is really bad news for us as migrants, and there's quite a big battle ahead, really.
Yeah, I just actually wanted to mention that.
Can I just say that it is also people with British passports who are having problems. I know two women who've been here for over 40 years, and the Home Office has already been iffing and butting about renewing their passports. So basically, no one's safe with the right wing, with the far right.
Yeah.
Yeah, no one's safe.
But I just actually wanted to say that, because UK left the EU, we are in the EU in Ireland, and things are tightening up. I mentioned earlier about the Asylum and Migration Pact, which is actually coming out. So countries are discussing, EU countries are discussing about this Asylum and Immigration Pact. I think European Network of Migrant Women have analyzed this from a migrant women perspective, but things are going to be very tight. Things are going to be very harsh. The immigration situation is becoming harder and harder, and we really don't know what will happen, to many, many, many people who are already in the countries, in Europe, and especially, for example, in the case of Ireland, I see it there, because sometimes we just talk about asylum seekers and refugees. In Ireland, we also have students, and I think it's good to mention some of the good policies that are there, especially for the student, because people can come to study in Ireland for 1 year, and then they are allowed to work for 2 years after that. So there are some also good policies, which I hope are not going to be impacted by this new Asylum and Migration Pact. So there's really going to be tough time ahead, especially for those who are within the international application, and it's getting worse and worse every time.
No, I mean, it's the same. It's not just the UK or the US. I think we have saying everybody is leaning towards the right. You look at Europe, France. I'm not saying Marine Le Pen will be the next president, but, she is gaining ground. Same for Finland or even some countries that we just didn't think would lean to the right. I think it's just, that's where the world is going. That's the direction of travel, unfortunately. Lots of countries are just becoming more and more introvert and going nationalists, so whatever that means. And I think until they realize that migrants are actually running their economies. So.
Yeah.
So we don't have any more questions. Yeah, I think I didn't want to end on that note, because that question says, if the environment is so hostile, then why come? So I thought that that was not a question that we would particularly want to discuss. So is that the question you're referring to? Yeah. Okay. So, but I think I would like to give you the last couple of minutes for each of you to sum up. If there's anything you want to say, anything pressing, any message, any campaign that you want to talk about, or anything else that you want to.
I'm going to use the moment just to talk about the Why Do I Have to Hide Away report that we presented yesterday. Please go to the website, anchlu.org.uk. This is documenting the impact of the far-right riots on women and children from Black and racially minoritized communities. I think it is the only report to date that is really talking about the impact of the riots on women and children. There are lots of reports out there, but they're quite gender blind or gender neutral. So I think it is a good read if you have time. And it's been authored by Rosie Lewis and Pragna Patel. So I would really recommend. And the other thing I really want to say, it is around no recourse to public fund again. Sorry, it is just such a critical issue. If your organization is working with migrant women, whether it is your main demographic or not, please, I think we should really rally behind this specific topic and make sure that we make a big push, because not all women are free from or are safe from abuse right now in the UK, and it is quite a big shame. Thank you.
So please support our campaign to extend the reforms that we have on immigration and domestic abuse to all women, migrant women, regardless of their immigration status. We are continuing our campaigning. Please, you can get more information from our website. And also we'll be doing individual campaigns now. It's like going back to the 80s and the 90s when we used to do a lot of anti-deportation campaigns. I think we're increasingly going to have to do that and go back to the grassroots. And I think that the feminists, we want, if you're truly intersectional and if you truly respect human rights for all and anti-racist, then you have to support women from all backgrounds. You know, obviously violence against women and girls have been weaponized by the far right, have been demonizing migrant men and migrant communities. There's a hostile environment that is just getting worse for everyone. We don't know how much longer we can support women if they lose indefinite leave to remain, because a lot of them apply for indefinite leave and are not able to get full citizenship for a long time. So as a result, none of them will get the right to stay in the country, and that will lead to women who are abused, victims of abuse, or survivors of abuse who are going to be deported and be subject to abuse and harassment by the state and by society in this country. You know, it's ironic that they're talking about, you know, migrants. There's a problem of integration, therefore they haven't adopted British values, and that's why we must reduce migration in this country, as well as the whole thing around benefits and predators and so forth. All that narrative has been used. But you know, what is British values? British values is not being patriarchal and racist and anti-woman. It's actually human rights values. It's the values that we all support around intersectional feminism, which is around anti-racism, women's rights, and rights for the working class. And we should be able to unite in order to be able to put forward what we see as British values, and which are human rights values. And I think that's what we've got to take forward in order to build a solidarity, strong grassroots campaign that uses and makes the rhetoric of the left real in terms of rights for all. Thank you.
I think I'm actually going to pick up from the human rights perspective that you have spoken there, because in Ireland I also sit as one of the Irish human rights commissioners, you know, to work with the state on upholding, you know, human rights of people in the country. And when we talk about human rights, they're universal. So there's none of us is born better than another. We are all born free and equal. That's the very first one. And also people have the right to seek asylum. People have the freedom to travel, but when we go to countries of where we go, this is not the case, you know, and people end up not actually having to access their rights because somebody else is controlling that, and it's making life of another one very, very miserable. So I just want to say that it's very important that we all work together towards not only an equal world, but a world where we are all treated with dignity and respect. And in terms of, handling the far right, because this is real, you know, it was very shocking when some of the women were phoning our organization to ask us whether they should take children to school because a mother had been attacked with one of her child when she was actually going to pick her from school, and it was very, very scaring. So it has been a very, very scaring moment, seeing even some of these far-right people burning buses and destroying, you know, countries' property which have nothing to do with immigration as well. And so there's quite a lot that is happening that we need to speak out. But we need to speak out about all the evil things that are happening. You know, I know we have not spoken about Palestine, you know, in this conversation that we have here, that even as we speak now, there are so many women who are suffering. There are so many women who are being moved around, being actually traded like they are goods, and we don't know, or we are not aware of it. But just to become aware of the rights that we take for granted sometimes, and I take for granted as a black woman in Europe. I have a European passport. I can travel around, and another woman would not have that, you know, to help her access. But the importance of upholding to human rights, those universal declaration of human rights. And as women, if we are calling ourselves feminists, supporting each other and ensuring that we bring other women on the table when we are discussing important issues and important things that will help us to advance. So thank you.
Thank you very much for a really interesting discussion. I think the key takeaway is that the needs, the rights, the demands of migrant women really do need to be center stage of the feminist movement. I think that's something that we have lacked. We've lacked enough solidarity and support from the white women's movement, and I think that that's really important to take on board, because actually this loss of rights is going to end up with loss of rights for all of us in the end. So thank you very much for coming along to this session. Thank you to my speakers.